All right, it is Sunday, the weekend of November 12th, and welcome to the Trader Hub Weekly Market Review. Let's go ahead and look at the price action for the indexes this week. Kind of a slow week, but some important price action. Price, what do you see on the NQ?
Well, it was actually a pretty exciting week for the NQ. We can see here on Monday that it started moving up and kind of breaking out of this resistance in here, and it went a little sideways for a couple days. But on Friday, we found that it had this nice green print up above some key levels of resistance that we're seeing here. And I think we like to see a hold at the top of these wicks here for continuation higher. These levels are pretty big levels from back here, where it produced this really long leg down. So regaining that level is critical here. What do you think?
I see pretty much the same thing. I only say it was slow because we kind of, talking about those important levels, we kind of came up to them and kind of went sideways, as you pointed out, for a few days. Looked like maybe it would have been, and I actually think because of that could have been a great indication for a potential short here. But, you did just get this huge trend day on Friday that just really broke out of all of that, and we closed above. That looks really good. Speaking about long term, I think you're dead on about why those areas are important. This is clearly an area where before this whole thing broke down, this was the area that it tried to hold at, and when that area broke, that's only then is when we got that huge move to the downside. So breaking back above and potentially holding these areas is probably the biggest key area that we've tested in quite some time. Certainly probably more equivalent to something like when we were trying to break out to the upside down here at the high 12,000s. So I see this as potentially the first move in reversing this trend, this downtrend. If you wanted to say these were all lower highs, which we'd been saying, this is the first indication of that potentially breaking down, and we're going to see new highs. I think the major single thing that I see is, because we closed up here, this is the first higher high on the daily time frame since this whole downtrend of consolidation sideways. So that's really big. I also, just if you're really looking macro, I think that you could really argue that this whole move, this is like a cup and handle, right? So you have this rounding bottom and then this sort of like downward channel. If you believe that, then this is the first break out of that. So that's another bullish check mark in the bull camp. So all good things. I do agree with your level on needing to hold in this area. You could see it come back down and test the low of that range as well, but it would still look good. Either way, regaining these levels is nothing but positive. Looks like we're probably on our way back to the highs after some either retesting or just blowing right through those. Kind of my thoughts. Let's go ahead and move on to the ES. What are your thoughts on there? It's a little different, but similar moves.
Yeah, we had a little bit more sideways instead of just up with a small break. But it did have a similar print at the end of the week. It didn't quite achieve the same way, but we're still looking for similar. I think this 43.79, 43.80, we'll call it, is still a good level to hold. And that would definitely be a decent place to put a buy. If it were going to go straight up, we'd want to see it hold these levels in here. But there's a good chance it could come back down before continuing upward. What do you think?
Yeah, I see the same thing. I think that, like those levels we were just talking about on the NASDAQ, 44.40 is kind of the level to gain. Like if we could really gain above there, we'd have recaptured some significant level toward going back to the upside, and that would again give us our higher high on the daily. So I don't really see any indication of that not being likely to happen. I think that the last 2 weeks have been a pretty strong reversal. Technically is still within the consolidation here on the ES, but I think the NASDAQ breaking above and making a higher high is kind of telling us something about the market. I see this moving higher, and those areas that you pointed out are great holds.
I want to point out real quickly, this 43.80 level right here produced a new low, as well as right here produced a new low. So that's a major level to be up above and flip to support.
Yeah, I think that's why we consolidated there for
Mhm.
5 or 6 days before breaking out. So that was an inflection point. So makes sense. Let's go ahead and look at the small caps. Again, not really the same look. So it's kind of just making these lower lows and lower highs. This was essentially the area that needed to break out above this, let's call it 1780 level, to either make an equal high or a higher high, maybe up here at 1820. This is still somewhat of a breakdown look. Now, if that area right there that we see, that green candle, if that holds at around 1700, that could be potentially a higher low if we can break above 1780. But we still need to see more price action and confirm, because this could easily just come right back up to 1730 and move lower. People say the small caps lead the stock market. That would not be good, but they are still separate indexes. A lot of this price action on the major indexes are a result of only a few companies. So if those companies continue to perform, we could see a bit of a divergence there. Wouldn't be totally out of order too, given the price action of RTY. We could see some more sideways movement, but we'll have to see if we can break back above levels here or make new lows. So we just got to keep our eye on the RTY. Do you see anything differently?
Nope, that's exactly my feeling. If it doesn't hold, this is the place to hold.
Yeah.
Or
sure.
Or it dies pretty bad.
Yeah, it's gonna be rough if it loses that last low. Then we're talking about the box that we've drawn. Pull up the weekly to talk about that. We kind of said that this is probably the quintessential area to look for the next long or the next area of major support. So if we continue to lose this, we're going straight there. Let's talk about gold. Gold has just been, it's been consolidating, a little bit down after touching this 2008, a little bit higher than that. It topped out at 2020 up here, but after a huge move, totally expected to have a pullback. And I would say that we really want to see this 1942 and 1924 levels hold. Those were the major areas that had tried to hold and then broke to produce that last low down in the 1800s. So now that we've kind of regained those levels, those are the areas most likely to produce good longs. So we want to see these areas specifically hold if we're going to make it back to all-time high. Otherwise, this could just be, a huge false breakout. Kind of a huge move for me to consider that, but we'll just have to see. I do really like 1942 and 1924 for potential longs, with stops kind of just below, maybe a little under these wicks, or even you could say below 1900 if you want to be real conservative. But until we lose those levels, specifically what I'm getting at is this still looks good for higher. What do you think?
Yeah, I like it holding right here, because this is the level that produced the low. So if it's able to hold here, that's a really good signal that we're gonna see higher highs still on gold. But it could come down and also tag that gap. But that's
the dreaded gap fill. Yeah, that would be a long way down. But like you said, it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really went on like the weekly chart, that could still potentially look like a higher low. So it depends on the time frame, right? But I think that the current areas are good options for long trades. You could scale in at those two levels and it would be reasonable, and then you could get out on your stop loss and potentially hold for those lower levels like you were talking about. I like gold right now. I think we'll see highs relatively soon here. What do you think about the Dow, the YM1?
Let's see here. Very similar to the NQ and ES, more so the ES because it hasn't broken out here like the NQ kind of did. But we're seeing these important levels. I'm going to go up to the weekly that we're gaining. See this level here is the one that produced all-time high. So coming back up above that is a big deal, and holding that and kind of bouncing off of it. You'll also see that this is the level that rejected to produce the low, and we're up above it. So that's a great indication that these areas here that we wicked up into will hold and will go higher. What do you think?
Yeah, I see it very similar to you. I actually really like this price action, kind of violently regaining back up to this level. Even though we consolidated when we tapped this level, immediately the next day we had a nice follow through on bullish volume and moving back up. This looks like a nice quick textbook use of support for higher. Even though we didn't technically gain up here at 34,400, I still see it's going to come back there and at least test that again, potentially break that. This looks like really good follow through on Friday. So I think the Dow is going to at least test higher again. We'll have to see if we can actually break out from there. But this looks like quintessential, consolidation. You can call it accumulation. Retest at the recent support, and now we're moving higher. So I don't see any reason, unless we lose levels here, to really call it a failure. It looks good for now. Anyway, let's go ahead and look at oil. Oil has, just kind of taken a dive the last, let's see how much we've lost in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, from 88 to, we actually had a low about 75. So huge downturn. Definitely we've lost the daily trend at this point, I would say. The weekly trend is still technically intact, but starting to look a bit weaker. I will say that I actually think that, looking through the lines here, if you want to call it that, 75, making it all the way down there was not a bad long. I think if we lose 73 or 74, we're starting to confirm loss of the trend and potentially going back to consolidating here. We'll just have to see if it can regain 80 or if we're going to lose 73, 74. What do you think?
I really like the 4 hour for long. If you want to look at that.
Yeah. Why don't you pull that up?
So you can see what it's doing there. And it did make it above this area here where it was previously trying to hold. So if it prints a higher low, I think it has a chance to make it back to 80. But that's
it does look nice.
See what happens.
But yeah, I mean, like you said, we'll just have to see what's going on. If it continues to drill down, it's gonna be hard to take some longs. I would like to see it regain over this area right here, just because I can see that if we're looking at the 4 hour, there's like a flat top consolidation there, or like a support resistance level, and then come back down to like maybe this lower one, 76.50, and then bounce. I would take a long there with the stop below 75, right. Probably. That'd be a quintessential long. That looks good. Retesting, targeting 80 or retest looks good.
Yep.
Nice catch. Let's look at the dollar. This has had a lot of fake outs on its sideways consolidation. We decisively kind of pulled back, and you wouldn't call it lost levels here. And then this whole week we've kind of been, drifting back up. We are technically above or right on this key price level within the range. At this point, it's hard to say until we get like a definitive breakout on either side which way it's going to go, just given the choppy price action. We still are making lower lows, even though we're having some, maybe you would call those equal highs. It's hard to call this. I would say we might still see 104.6, potentially lower than that. But, it's had some strength up here at these numbers. It could come and break out. I think if it breaks over 106.8, we're going to see 107.3 retested and potentially move out from there. I'm not really confident on what's happening with the dollar right now. Maybe you can tell, but we're just gonna have to see which way it goes. What do you think? You see anything that I don't on this?
Well, not particularly. Just wanted to point out it. So it needs to go lower before it can go higher, and you can see how it went lower here and then produced a higher high, a really local higher high, not an overall higher high. And so that's why when it didn't achieve and failed, it produced a new low, and it needed to go lower than right there, and it's done that and then broken out up above it. So that's pretty interesting. If this low doesn't hold this zone, what we would see is then the 104, what you're saying. And the question is, how do we know if it's gonna happen? Well, you really don't, but you can use the lower time frames as the decider on when that's gonna go against you. And I'd say right about there, you definitely want to hold that.
Yeah,
Anyway.
that's a good look. Let's talk about the KRE banks. I think we saw some much needed price action last week, and then we had kind of a reversion in the mean this week. You know, it gained above the area that we were talking about that it needed to do to reverse, so that looks good. We did break back below them this week, but still, we've gotten our higher high look on the daily, breaking this downtrend. So I would say that we could hold somewhere around 40 or 39-ish in that range, and then move back higher. That would also coincide with a gap fill, so that would, you know, kind of knock that out of the concerns, and then we could break back up to retest 45. I still think 45 is the key level that needs to be regained if we're going to retest highs or make new highs on the higher time frames for the KRE. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that looks good to me. Something like that makes a good bit of sense.
Yeah, that's kind of textbook what I think needs to happen. And then you could even see it reach 45, come back to that box, hold there, and then break out of 45, or just go straight through 45. But either way, that's kind of what we're looking at for the KRE. I don't really think there's too much else to talk about. You know, if it loses 38.50, it's not a great look, right? We talked about that before, because that will be the second time it's failed there. We're going to go lower, 36, and then we're talking about getting toward that is the last area support before it starts to look real spooky. Well, I think that's it for this week. Thanks again for tuning in to the Trader Hub Weekly Market Review. If you like this kind of content, sub to the Hub and consider joining our Trader Hub Discord community server. You can find it using our link in the description. See you next week.
Take care.